Welcome to Rules of Villainy, where three new trading card game players quest and challenge their way to the competitive top tables and discuss their opinions on Disney's Lorcana. This is episode 9. I'm Insert Name, joined by my two co-hosts, Insert Name and Insert Name. How's it going, winners? How we doing tonight, I should say.
Fresh off the win. Toronto.
Congratulations. Go. Show me that golden Mickey.
Yeah, I wish I did. I wish I had it. Yeah. So, but we also survived the well, I should say, let me go back and explain that the Disney Lorcana folks, you know, in their haste to get out and celebrate the winner of the DLC Toronto, they shipped on the social media the incomplete name. They just were like, congrats to insert name. So that's where that joke comes from. Pretty innocent mistake, and they fixed it fairly quickly, but still nonetheless kind of humorous, and will definitely, I think, be a meme in the community for a while.
We'll have merch in the store soon enough.
Right.
Yeah. Exclusive to Patreon members. I'm just like, I keep dropping it every once in a while. Eventually, let's go be true.
We'll have one, yeah.
We'll have one.
Surprised no one in the comments has said, you guys don't even have a Patreon. Like, why do you keep bringing it up?
I'm just practicing for when we do,
Getting ahead of the curve.
Fake it till you make it, right?
Yeah, getting ahead of the curve. And so, because y'all want to hear more from us. But we also survived the Hiram errata that put the community up into an uproar over the past. Well, we found out relatively quick. It was a very short uproar, but it was a very loud one.
Yes.
So I think, as Brad, you were saying that they've kind of came out while we were recording last episode to correct that.
It happened right before we started recording, and then the internet went into a frenzy about how crazy of a change that would be. And just unheard of that they would just change a second card that quickly, and a card that's so crucial to the, well, used to be the main draw engine in Sapphire. But yeah, while we were recording and speculating about it on last week's episode, Ravensburger came out and nipped it in the bud and said, hey, nothing is changing. This is a mistake in the app, and we'll get that fixed. So that's good news.
Yeah, well, except I'm going to follow the lead of Andy here into the conspiracy territory here. and say, like, well, I'm just saying, like, listen. Do you think they were just testing us? They're like, let's see if they notice. Hiram's too powerful, y'all. And then, like, the community was like, oh my God, what are you doing? After Bucky, you're giving us this.
Right.
Crowdsourcing ideas.
Yeah, crowdsourcing.
They release it. They see what people say, and then they actually release the errata. I mean, they had to have a picture of that, right?
Yeah, at some point. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. They had to have that image had to go through some approvals, right? Or somebody was like, messing with the Photoshop in the background.
I'm wondering how long it's been in the app that way. I mean, I'm guessing maybe people go into the app constantly and see specific cards or whatever, and maybe it's been that way the whole time, but I can't imagine he's been out since set 2 that, like, but why would it change a different iteration of that card between when it was put into the app for set 2 and last Wednesday night? Just
Carl, disgruntled app developer who loses to Hiram and Sapphire
I'll show them
week at the Ravensburger Weekly Lorcana League. He's tired of going 0-3, and so
against red blue. Yeah,
he's like, if we can just sneak this in here and ship it, that'll be my glory day.
Yeah,
that's what it was.
He's like, they errated Bucky. We're just gonna sneak in another one. So
did you say a rookie?
I did. New word. I was hoping you weren't gonna like highlight it, Brad. Thank you so much.
I hear funny word combos.
It's all good. It's all good. We're doing it live here. Also DLC Seattle tickets went on sale on Monday. You both got tickets?
Let's go. Me and the wife got tickets.
Nice.
And you as well, right?
I did. I got a ticket.
You don't sound as excited.
No, well, I got a ticket for my cat, and so sadly, unfortunately, he won't be making an appearance on the podcast tonight because he is hospitalized. The poor little baby boy. I know. I tell you what, I'm going to go full Bob Barker here for a second, except for not to spade and neuter your pet, which you should absolutely do, but to get pet insurance for your pet. That's all I'm going to say. That's like my PSA for the night from our listeners out there is if you have a pet who is young, please get pet insurance. You don't want to have to make difficult financial decisions without it.
Right.
And I'm really blessed that I have it. But I am very excited. I was like right at we let you and I, Brad, we left the store we run the league in a little bit early so we could get home, and we were right there at 9:00 to get a ticket here in the Central
refresh.
I was happy that we did that. I was happy it was a slow night. We had what 7 of us and just kind of an open play and having some fun, and I was like, you're right. Yeah, it's we got about a half an hour. I'm gonna go home, get set up for it because I'm really excited about this one again. As one of my friends reminded me, she told me, she's like, you weren't excited about Chicago. I can't believe you're going to Seattle. And I was like, well, Chicago was one of those ones where I was kind of stuck in like not knowing what I wanted to play, didn't want to play against Bucky every single game and whatever. But now what's really cool is this isn't our first DLC together, but it's our first one as a podcast. And I'm so excited to go and meet some other creators and just have a good time and, spreading the word. And it's amazing.
And it'll be our first one where we are as a team really there. I mean, we do have some team members going to Vegas, but this will be like a really large showing for the Rules of Villainy team, and I'm actually really excited about it. Stuff. I was gonna sing at the beginning of intro here to be like "Hello Seattle," but then I don't want to get a strike from YouTube on it. But then I thought that probably won't happen because I'm terrible at singing, so they wouldn't want to strike it because they'd be like, nobody's gonna even relate that to our original one.
I wouldn't say you're terrible, Vince. You're our little songbird.
So now we'll move on to DLC Toronto as we kind of highlighted. So we want to obviously say congrats to insert name for winning first place. No, just kidding. We want to congratulate Diego Saz for his first place win with the Emerald Amber Sing Together. What do you all think about the rounding out the top 8 there in this kind of interesting meta, if you will, without Ursula's returns, with the errata Bucky, and so no Shimmering Skies, only Ursula's return and previous, and the Bucky errata.
You want to start, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun to watch. I am always a huge fan of competitive Lorcana. I think this sort of unique meta that existed only in this tournament allowed some of the better players out there to cook up some really spicy brews, and I kept tuning in thinking, oh great, they're showing some meme deck versus some other meme deck, like what is this? But they all turned out to be really, like I said, really spicy decks that kind of took me for a surprise, and I think it was ultimately a interesting exercise in in the path of Lorcana that we're on here. Hopefully we don't have too many of those again. It is really, really weird that it kind of all lined up like that on the calendar. I really would love to, like, everything I saw there that I was like, oh, I gotta try that. Like, I gotta throw that into a deck. I was like, oh wait, yeah, there's like 200 more cards that I got to consider that they didn't have to, so it was, it was both fun and interesting, but I'm excited for the next DLC and the next stuff to come.
Yeah, I'm the same way. The games that I watched were really exciting, and I had the same thought that Andy did on one of the. I forget which deck it was. So I was like, oh, I could actually build this. And then I realized, oh, Shimmering Skies is not in it. So like, it's a really hard, like, moment to be like, oh yeah, well, it could be fun to play, but it's gonna be against things that they're not seeing in that tournament too. So, but I think the top 8 look really cool. It's fun to see Ding Kong Pham get his 3rd qualification, 5th place. He almost made the top 4, so he didn't get the Mickey, but he got, he's just taking that dig card with his red blue and riding that wave. It's such a fun journey to be on, watching
that's his
watching him at
favorite
every single one
card.
of them. Yeah, it's incredible. I was happy to see him so high up in the rankings, and bummed at the same time that he was in top 4. But there's always the next 2, right? I'm sure he's probably doing Seattle. I would love to meet him in Seattle. Like that, there's so many things I'm excited about in Seattle. But one thing that you're probably going to touch on is that what's most interesting in that top 8 is no Ruby Amethyst. How do you feel about that?
That was exactly what I was going to say. You stole the words right out of my mouth. I was very surprised that there was no Ruby Amethyst in the top 8. There was in the top 16. It just didn't make it into the top 8. And I think that's interesting, for a lot of reasons that, Ruby Amethyst has been really a big staple in the meta, been a very competitive deck. We saw that it didn't have a great conversion rate in the previous kind of DLCs. And I thought one of its biggest weaknesses was the Emerald Steel with Bucky, particularly. And I figured, with that being a Rodad, probably Ruby Amethyst is going to be the deck to beat. But, I think there's also good explanations for that, is that when other decks don't have to compete against the, Bucky variant of that Emerald discard deck, they can do other tech choices to make that deck more favorable to a Ruby Amethyst heavy meta. And, we don't have the results on that, but my guess is Ruby Amethyst was probably one of the most brought decks to Toronto. It wouldn't surprise me. It was the most brought deck, I think, to Fort Worth. So it would make sense to me that it was probably one of the most brought decks to Toronto. So again, I think, there's some explanation for that. And it'll be interesting to see kind of how it shakes out. I will say, I do think it would have been, I give Ravensburger a lot of credit for how well they put on these events, and they just keep getting better and better. I think my only real critique of this is that I really do think they need to rethink their policy of the 2 weeks after a big box release before they allow competitive events. I understand why they do that, but I think if folks, I don't think it would have really impacted this had they said set 5 is legal for Toronto. I think the people that were going to go to that tournament are going to be competitive players and are going to want to try to get the cards to play. And I think, as you alluded to, Andy, it's a little weird having this kind of in-between meta. That's, I don't think it's totally doesn't. I think we get some information that informs what's happening in Shimmering Skies. We don't see, it's not like decks just completely get torn apart and rebuilt. People in the beginning of a meta and still they'll trade in cards. They'll maybe still play a deck like Ruby Amethyst or, Sapphire Ruby, and they'll just kind of, figure out what cards they can add that'll make that deck stronger based on the new set, what's out there. So it's not totally, I think, a wash, but I would have been nice to see a really large tournament with Shimmering Skies versus the kind of side tournaments we had.
Yeah, I kind of disagree, honestly. I don't.
I mean, surprised. Why am I? I'm not at all surprised.
I mean, either way, I guess I wouldn't mind if they decided to break their rule for this, but I think ultimately what I disagree with is I think the rule is a good thing. I think we said this last week on the podcast, and we've said it before, and we'll probably say it again. We are incredibly blessed at the number of LGS, local game stores, that we have in our area. And I think you'd be surprised at how many people there actually are in places that don't have access to as much product from local game stores. and they do tend to rely on places like Target, or even people who just rely on once Target and Walmart and all these big box stores start getting more product, prices drop on these cards, right? A lot more cards hit the market, and it makes a lot of these decks more affordable. I also personally enjoy the length of time that it gives to sort of build up a meta. But I guess I could be okay with if they sort of broke the rule on this one and said, look, we don't want to have this one-time unique meta event. We want this to contribute to the larger meta that is going forward towards continentals and worlds and things like that. But I do like the idea of having this sort of delay. I know in other card games sometimes they have large scale events, maybe not like a DLC of 1,000+ people or something like that, but 200-300 people regional events that happen like on a Saturday, and the cards are released on a Thursday, right? And those cards are legal in that event, and it's like I definitely don't want something, that's the other extreme side of it or whatever, but I definitely enjoy the padding that they give.
Yeah, I think I would agree with you if there were more competitive events that were really affected by this. I think the fact that if there were these more regional events, I agree with you. I think the 2 weeks matters and stuff. But I think if you're going to go into a DLC is not cheap unless you are lucky to live in the city that it exists in, or can get there close. I mean, we went to Chicago, all three of us, and it still wasn't cheap for any of us. And that's only a 5-hour drive from St. Louis, 5.5-hour drive from St. Louis, so I think folks that
I was like, not when I drive.
That's going to be more expensive for all of us. And so I think when you're spending that money, you're going to find the cards. And I think also, a lesson I learned early from Ursula's Return, Brad always gives me trouble for waiting forever to open packs and stuff. And because I just let packs sit. And he's right. I shouldn't do that. And the reason for that is opening up all these packs, finding what I got. A lot of times, some of these cards, the best price you're going to get is that first weekend. I wish I would have bought the Clarabelles that first weekend. They were $15-$20. They're it's now a $40 card, so there is some, I think, push and pull. Yeah. Some cards are going to be more expensive that opening weekend, but I think,
Naveen is a card that has dropped greatly in price. Mufasa is another one.
Yeah.
So I think Clarabelle's going to drop in price as well too. The longer the set goes on, the more the price drops. The question is, where do we find that sweet spot of, but I definitely agree with you about the timing. Obviously Ravensburger knows when they're releasing these sets, and they know when they plan these DLC events. So why not just it happened with Atlanta, and it happened with Atlanta, the other cards were out, but you were only using the old set. And then Chicago, the cards had just come out. It was right after the deadline. So I think where the improvement could be made is maybe just sort of scheduling these at a better point in time where you make the rule that it's 2 weeks after. We'll stop having events 1 week after it opens, right? That's you're not following your own rule. You're getting rule checked by your own system.
I think that. Yeah, I agree too. I think that it's one of the learning curves too, is because it's a new market for them, right? And they're trying to make their place in it with the TCG sphere, and I think that in the years to come, the sets, they already have to be, in my mind, they already have to be looking ahead and being okay, we know that these sets are, like Andy just said, we know these sets are coming out on these dates, and if we're playing the 2025 DLCs, we can schedule them so we don't have another meta like this where it's still stuck in the last one, right? So I think with all of this so far has been just a learning curve, right? And I think that they're doing as well as they can with it, but there's absolutely room for improvement.
Yeah, I think there's some balance on they wanted to try to get the competitive stuff out, and they're trying to balance it. I think about in August, when would they? This would probably be the well, it still wouldn't be legal this week. Like the first week it would be legal would be next weekend, right?
Yeah, because it
2
came out
weeks
in
after.
big box
Because it
last
came
week.
out big size last Friday. So they'd push it into September. And because you think about it, it's like, well, Gen Con, they've got Gen Con weekend. The weekend beforehand
D23.
would be D23. And so this is probably like slotted perfectly in like the schedule for Ravensburger to have
Yeah.
it. And so, I'm sympathetic to some of the scheduling, but I agree. I think probably the biggest solution is just to do better with the scheduling of the event. Or if you're going to do this, maybe just make it a rule for the DLCs that we're gonna allow the most recent set, because I agree, like it's just weird covering Atlanta and now Toronto, where it's like there's not as much takeaways we can have, right? To say, how do you prepare for your local competitive events? How do you prepare for Vegas? We're not at a blank slate, but it's better to say, okay, well, we know now that what we've seen. So, but with that, we can move on and to talk a little bit about the side events constructed that were set 5. So, looking through these 3 that I found from the Inkdex and Dreamborn, it seems like it's a very diverse meta with a whole range of decks. But is there other than that, anything else stand out to you all?
I honestly think this sort of outlines the flip side. It outlines one side of what we were just talking about here. I think the incredibly diverse meta here is one, certainly a part of Lorcana being such a great game that it is. I do think it really breeds a diverse meta, but it just this is less than a week after big box launch kind of decks to be built, right? There are a lot of these here that I look at and I say, wow, that's spicy, like that sounds really good, and then I go, but why? Okay, but maybe and so there's a lot of it where these are all sort of, everyone's experimenting, right? No one has any experience. They have no big tournament. They have no other top 8 to go off of. They have only their internal testing against what they think will be the other decks they're playing against. And so it kind of, to me, it's a great starting point. But yeah, I wouldn't look at any one of these decks and go, that's top tier, right? Look at it. It got top 8 in this event,
I don't know, man.
I would look at it and say that's a good starting point, and let's see how the meta develops from here.
I don't agree.
Yeah.
Of course not.
This one that I'm looking at right now, this Blurple, the Sapphire Amethyst is
Unplayable.
what do you mean it's unplayable? Are you kidding me? I've been having great luck with an iteration of this.
Gonna say right off the bat, this deck is jank. You know why?
Why is that, Vince?
It has 60. It has 63 cards.
Well, let me tell you this though:
you just 170 get rid of bad ones.
170 players, and this was a 13-year-old kid from Ohio that won.
Oh, that's actually kind of cute. I didn't know that. Now I feel really bad. You really made me feel super bad now. Thanks, so Brad. I appreciate it.
No, Gavin is. I heard about this on. I heard about this on Twitter the other day. I think somebody shared. It might have been RMB or I don't remember, but it's been making its rounds. And this is a 13-year-old kid from Ohio that won this with the blue purple, and it's not much different than the version that I'm playing right now and having somewhat good success with. And it makes me excited to see how far it could go in a bigger tournament. 170 is no.
Wait. Did you just say how far I'll go?
I did say that. I didn't sing it though, and it's also not in this deck. You're right, so I get away with that one. What's also really exciting to me though too is the third place, and second place was a green steel, which I used to play all the time. But third place is my other favorite deck right now, and it's a little bit different than what I would expect, but it's a red Fossa deck that right now I'm just switching every night between blue purple and red yellow, and I'm having fun with each one of them. And so it excites me to see that, it could succeed in a tournament of this size. It's not, it's not 1,000 people or 2,000 people, but 170 is a pretty big tournament for what I'm used to.
Yeah,
For
and
sure.
that would be my, I think, like slight pushback for you, Andy, is what Brad just said. Like, these are actually fairly large tournaments. I mean, they're larger than any tournament we do in our leagues here.
Certainly.
And so, I mean, I think that's just good enough evidence that these decks are, at least competitive. Do we know that they'll be DLC level competitive? I don't know. I do think this like Sisu on Ice deck that won one of them, it actually is pretty good. I played it tonight actually against Ron, and we went 1-on-1 in that. And then I played Heather and went, I think 2-1 against her. So I think like seems like some of these are actually good competitive decks, and I think some lessons can be learned from these. So I would, encourage folks to check them out and see what's there, play with them, tinker around with them, just like Brad has here, and I have as well. So
maybe not the red Fossa one. Just saying.
I am playing you with my red Fossa this week. We're drafting on Thursday. Crap.
We're drafting.
I lost to Heather on one of them. She's playing the red Fossa. So
Ooh.
I don't think it's.
Brad's
I don't think it's as bad as this.
Spreading the disease.
Which, by the way, just for when Heather gets to this episode, I just want to say we're so sorry that we're so harsh on Emerald. We love you.
I'm not. I like Emerald. I've always liked Emerald. I just didn't like Bucky.
I don't.
Yeah.
Emerald's bad. Emerald's a bad color.
Oh my god.
No, I don't. It's not a bad color. It's just a style choice. If you like the discard thing, I'm not a fan of the discard play, but if you are, fine.
I think officially green per Disney is the color of disgust, right?
Okay. Actually, no. I'll tell you exactly what it is. If you give me one second.
While we're doing that, next up is Constituents Corner. If you'd like your question answered by the villains in the future, submit your question in the comments on our YouTube channel, or submit your questions via Twitter at Rules of Villainy. You can also submit questions by emailing us at rulesofvillainy@gmail.com. So our first question here comes from Jason, also Cam 1.0. Do the villains?
They're Brad's. You can't open the mayor's mail. This is his mail. It's Constituents Corner.
Well, he was looking.
You're gonna read his mail for him.
Well, I was gonna.
Yes. He was looking something up.
Yeah, and I had it. I was going to read it. You went right into the question. I thought I had a minute, so I was like, "Nope."
It's like you went right into it.
I was just going to ignore whatever he was looking up. It clearly wasn't that important.
No, it was from D23. It was the explanation of the colors and the shapes and everything. And I was going to read the Disney definition of what green was, since Andy wanted to define it as disgust, and it is
all
not
right.
true. Yeah, but
would you please? Would you like to read the question, Jason?
I would. Yes. This is a reformed one. He sent me another longer version, but I spoke to him and he's like, okay, here's the actual question. He goes, do the villains see simple aggro decks as a benefit or a detriment to the game in regards to attracting new players, young players, and casual players, regardless of how it performs in competitive meta? Who wants to take that?
Sure. I'll take it. I actually used to play aggro quite a lot. I think I've said it here before. Played Amber Amethyst. Affectionately, I call it now AA or Agroholics Anonymous, because it is the fastest color set. Lilo, Maleficent. Now you got Daisy Duck. You throw in bodyguards with a just in time on 3, or now even better bodyguards like Bulu and Donald. Is it a benefit or a detriment to the game? I think it exists. But I do think, I think it's not fun, right? I think you need the decision points of the game to have fun. At least for me, I don't like when the deck sort of plays itself. And I think there's sort of a pitfall that newer players get into. It's an easier deck to play, certainly. So if you have a younger kid that is just trying to get into card games or something, this is a great deck. They'll be able to win some of the time, surprisingly a large amount of the time for maybe, their skill level, being a newer player. But I think there's some pitfalls that people end up playing these aggro decks. They get sort of this, affection towards this style of play, and they become sort of ignorant to the idea that you need more. There's more aspects to the game than just questing for lore and trying to rush to 20. And I've seen lots of players just think this game is less fun than it actually is, because essentially they sit down and play week after week and they're just rolling the dice. They're just flipping a coin. They're playing a deck that doesn't give them very much control of the game. It doesn't allow them to make these decisions. And I definitely think there's room to sort of bridge that, to try and help players learn that there's more to this game than just questing. That even just the simple aspect of not questing a character when your opponent has a character that can trade with it for free, right? That's a very common mistake very, very new players play. They quest all the time, and you go, well, you want to save that for a more advantageous thing in the future, right? Characters with challenger, things like that. And I think these very one-sided aggro decks sort of make it hard for you to branch off and learn more about that. And so, yeah, I think hopefully podcasts and stuff like ours help you learn how to play the game in different styles other than these sort of one-sided aggro. And you can learn that this game has a lot of fun to it that isn't just sort of questing forever.
Yeah, I agree with you for the most part. I've been on record calling it brain dead aggro, and I know that's reductive, because it's in a sense like, to the core of the game. The core goal of the game is to get to 20 lore, and if you can do it fast, so be it. I used to play Emerald Amethyst, or not Emerald, Amber Amethyst as well. I didn't do I learned the bodyguard package from you, actually, at our local league, because I used to run it with Arthur and all the other small bodies. The problem with running that deck at any time before was it dies to steel. If you play anybody with steel, you're not going to get the 20 as fast as you want. You probably won't get the 20 at all, because you're just going to run out of cards or run out of draw to get there. I agree with you that I think it's a good deck for kids to learn. Kids like to win. Kids like to see, kids like to have fun, and to them, getting all these small questers out there and playing. We know a kid, Izzy, who's had great success with a version of this, and she continues to play it and has a lot of fun. But she hasn't. I mean, both her parents and her whole family play, so she's seen every aspect of the game probably, and maybe it's just what's most fun to her. I think the fun part of it that you mention is what's subjective, right? I played it, I had fun with it until I didn't anymore. I realized there was other combos out there that were interesting to me. When I switched from that to red blue, I think is when I finally got on the red blue train and played that for a long time. The item rush, one turn kill, I think is what you called it, with Ariel. We had a lot of mirror matches with that, and I was like, this deck is fun, getting all these items out here, questing the Ariel, all that. But do I think it's a detriment or a benefit? I think it's just it's an option, and it's something like if you can find an opportunity to use it well, so be it. That's your prerogative. But the most fun that I personally ever had with the new version of it with Daisy was when I was in a mirror match with Jimmy, because it's like the mental game of okay, I know what your deck's going to do, and I know what my deck's going to do. Who's going to do it better on whether the play or the draw? And then so the mental gymnastics that at least I was doing, but I'm also a chronic overthinker, made that fun for me. But then when I'm playing another deck that I know that I'm going to win in 4 turns, I'm just against a deck where had no answers for it, I'm like, okay, well, I'd rather play something more thought-provoking than just getting the 20 really, really quickly. So that's my take on it. What about you, Vince?
Yeah, I'd say that I think you both have valid points. I think aggro is just part of the game, right? Like, we're really now, in my opinion, really starting to see aggro develop as a deck in the game. Arguably we saw some aggro ish decks earlier, but a lot of decks previous have been what I would say fit more categorically into the mid range decks. So we're now really starting to see a push to having aggro in the tool. And you know what? I don't think it's a benefit or a detriment to the game. I think it's just how TCGs develop. You've got aggro players, you're going to have mid-rangey players, players that, are really into discard. And if that's your style of play, that's what you want. Like, have fun in the game. You got Andy over here shaking his head.
Thumbs down.
On discard. But I think it's just one of those. I also think I don't want to repeat everything that you both have said, but it's just highlighting again that I think aggro is easy to play, so it makes it a good area to enter the game. But honestly, for kids, I would not recommend aggro. I would recommend bringing them into the game because what makes Disney Lorcana fun and I think has its emphasis is the IP. We're Disney fans and building a princess deck or a pirate deck or a puppy deck is way more fun for kids to get into the game. And there's nothing wrong with starting the game as a social player. I started off into this game as a collector, then got into the social play, and here I am now wanting to be a competitive player. And so you can start that step by step. And so what I would say to new players is don't worry about playing aggro. I wouldn't introduce them to aggro. I'd say play a deck that you think is fun, that sits at the table. And if that happens to be aggro, great. If it's not, that's totally fine. So I don't think it's a benefit or a detriment. I ultimately just think that's just the nature of the game, and we're going to have to live with aggro for the foreseeable future. And that's just how the game is going to play out.
I will say one last point is please, Ravensburger, add better removal to this game. It's way too expensive, way too inefficient. I don't entirely agree with Vince saying it's a new thing. I think every set, everyone looks at the cards and goes, how do I build a deck? And they go, the easiest thing to build is just to throw all of the most aggro cards in a deck, and they build that. And every set, we have to deal with that annoyance, and the removal tools we get barely keep up with what they got. And so, yes, please, more removal. Thank you.
All right. Next question.
Oh, sorry. I'm still hung up on the removal thing, but we can address that another time. All right. Question 2 is from Lycos14 from Sunflower Lumineers. If you have pulled an enchanted or two, which one was your favorite and why? Or if you haven't pulled one, which enchanted out of all the sets would you like to pull?
So I'll go first. I think it's Lycos, but I could be wrong.
Lycos. Okay, maybe I.
So
apologies.
Let me.
He's gonna show
it. My enchanted, which is
my hello.
So so I couldn't believe I pulled this. So I was thinking about this story, right? So I actually was buying a bunch of Target packs, and I would just leave them around. So the hangers, I bought 24 from Target, and I was opening 2 a day. So I had a doctor's appointment where I had to because I have really bad acid reflux, so I'd have an endoscopy. So I opened a pack before I had my endoscopy, and nothing. And then I get home a few hours later after I'm coming back to life from the anesthesia, and open this pack, and I'm pulling it one at a time, going one by one, and I see the enchanted symbol, and I pull it up, and it's this Elsa, and I was like, "You've got to be!" I lost my freaking mind within minutes. I had taken a photo of it. It was in our area Discord. I had sent it to all of you. It's I couldn't believe it. That I
sitting around in a random pack in your apartment that I would have opened days ago.
Yeah. So But I will say there's still one enchanted I really, really want to get, and that is the Tinkerbell Giant Fairy from Chapter
Sure.
1. It's the one enchanted that I want to get that I don't have.
All right, what about you, Andy?
My favorite enchanted is not one that I pulled, but actually one that I won. It's my first ever Rockstar Stitch that I won. Stitch is one of my favorite characters, if not my favorite. He's my favorite character from Disney, and that art is just amazing in my opinion. And the feeling of being able to win it at my sort of home store, if you will. We were actually talking before the podcast about how we all sort of met at Bodox, the game store that I play at very often, and it was awesome. I also wouldn't mind a Tinkerbell. I also wouldn't mind an Elsa. You know, if anyone's got one lying around, Vince. But you know, I'm definitely pleased with the enchanteds that I've pulled. So I
the ones that you bought.
Yeah, I do have I win a lot of rounds at our local game store, and their pricing there is store credit. And so when I walk in and I see an enchanted that's like $50 or something, I'm like, count the store credit. That's an incredibly good price. You know,
Do they
I
still have
remember
that royal tantrum?
they might. That was like $60 or something like that. It was hard to pass up. But I especially getting into this right at the beginning. I mean, enchanteds are like hundreds and hundreds of dollars for most of them. A lot of them have calmed down now, thankfully. So it is a lot easier to sort of collect a lot of the ones that you want. I was actually really surprised looking at them recently. But yeah, I definitely jump at a good deal on enchanted. What about you, Brad? What's your favorite enchanted? Like we even need to
the question is, what's the favorite that did you pull? But my which I will get to. My favorite which I will is the scar that from this set. My lighting in here is never good enough, and my camera, Andy will tell you, is not great. But is the scar from set 5. As soon as they announced that scar, I had to get it. And then a local friend of ours, we talked about him on here, Nick, he pulled it, didn't want it, and I was like, what do you want for it? And I made a big trade, got it, and I'm thrilled. As far as my favorite one that I've pulled, it's a toss up between my first one, which was this Arthur. It came from a trove for set 2, and that was the time where I was playing the hyper aggro, so it was fitting. But it was my very and I did play with it, yeah, as you should.
Madman.
Yeah. So I wonder how I could convince Vince to let me use that Elsa in my Blurple deck.
Listen, I've changed my mind. I think it's fine. You play your cards; they're there to play for. I would consider playing with my enchanteds, with the exception of Elsa. Elsa will never be played for obvious reasons.
Yeah, and I'm totally kidding about that. But so yeah, I would say Arthur is probably, just because it was my first one. I have Morph as well, who was one that my girlfriend opened in the first box that we got for set 3. So that's a high contender as one I'll probably never trade either. But yeah, if there was one that I wanted to get, it was Super Goof from Ultra Ursula's Return. I didn't get that one. I was very lucky last set to get 3 of them with Anna, Yensid, and Jasmine. But which, yeah, that's my answer. I enjoy the hunt for getting them. It's the reason why I still buy Chapter 1, trying to get the Tinkerbell or the Belle or the. I would be the happiest with Belle or Elsa, but the Tinkerbell's really cool too because I play a lot of Steel. But yeah, you want to go to the next one?
Yeah,
let's go to the next one.
All right, this is from Twitter at Epic Switzer. The question is. Question posted to the. Oh, sorry. I'm reading your preface to it. There have been 4 regular Pokemon expansions and 2 special collection sets per year. Does this feel like the right amount? Too much? or do you think Lorcana should work up to a similar 4+2 release cadence 2? That's a lot of twos. I'll start and just say no immediately because my wallet would not be able to keep up with that. I already buy too much product as it is, and if they were releasing more and more stuff in a more in a smaller window, then it would just be impossible for me to get away from it. Right. I put a lot into each set, mostly at the beginning of each one. Then I buy periodically throughout the remainder of the set and kind of gear up toward the next one every 3 months. But if they were to release little mini things in between those, it would. I don't know that I could handle it with as much time and money that I put into it now. Thinking about putting even more is like blowing my mind.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you there. I'm a no. Absolutely not. Please don't. In fact,
yes.
I actually think that there's an argument to be made that 4 sets might actually be too much. That it might be better to go to 3 sets and 1 special set a year. Because I will say it's like, so I've heard, I don't play Star Wars Unlimited. Star Wars Unlimited does do 3 sets a year, and things do start to get a little stale in there towards the end of the, their meta. So, it does seem like maybe needs to be something between the 3 and 4 sets and stuff. My main reason to say why I think maybe there should be less than 4 sets is because, it does feel very fast. It's like we get a set, we have these events, and then we're on to the new one. And I think, as we talked about this issue with these DLCs, having less sets might actually allow Ravensburger to have some more flexibility to keep that 2-week rule for the big box stores, allow them a little bit more flexibility, and having, a special set that just, kind of could be like a theme set during the year or whatever, just to add a little spice to what otherwise might be like a long gap between others and stuff. I mean, I'm going to still buy the 4 sets as long as I have a well-paying job. But it is starting to get a little like taxing. I've noticed each set, I'm still buying a lot of product, but I'm buying, kind of less and less as the sets go on and being much more strategic about what I buy and get.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree. 4 is probably pretty good. There are times where even with 4, I feel like it gets a little stale at the end of the set where I'm like, okay, for me, a big part of it is when I go to Target and my wife doesn't want to buy any more packs from the current set that exists. I'm like, okay, Ravensburger, Disney, time to release a new set, because if that happens, we know
I don't
we have
believe that
way
this has
too
ever
many.
happened. I don't believe
that is kind of unbelievable.
Yeah,
it happens, and it's because we we do what Brad says and what a lot of people do. We buy a bunch at the beginning, and then we buy a little bit here and there and there and there. You do enough weekly drafts, you do enough, just regular nights and buy packs when you're not going to go to a local game store to play Disney Lorcana and not buy a pack. Come on, what kind of insane person would you be if that was the case, right? So obviously you're buying these packs over and over again, and it's like, there have been times, even in just the year that it's existed, where I felt that a set has gotten a little stale. I think, but I definitely, I don't know that you could, I'm talking about shaving like maybe a week off of this or something. Not enough room to fit another set in there, like a 5th set or something. But I don't know that we need to go down to 3. The idea of a special set, from my wallet standpoint, no, definitely not. But I could definitely find a compromise in there. Something like maybe, if they had a Halloween or a Christmas theme set where, let's say it was,
or things like
Brad's pointed to the D23. That's a little different. 6 cards, and it's special versions of them. But I'm thinking like let's say they have like a Halloween themed set. It's Disney Lorcana Halloween. It is all cards from sets that already exist at the time of it being released. So if they did it for this Halloween, it would be sets 1 through 5, and they would pick, I don't know, 50 cards from all 1,000 or whatever that exist, and they would give them a little bit of new art, and they would keep the text and the playability exactly the same. And so you wouldn't actually have to buy any of these for your deck. It would be a possibility for you to buy Mickey Mouse friendly face or whatever that bland 3/3 character is, or a Sergeant Tibbs, but he's wearing a Garfield costume, or I guess maybe that's not the right IP.
It would be Garfield, but yeah.
It wouldn't be the right
That's
IP.
dangerous. I like that idea.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like it would be something that it doesn't hurt your wallet. You don't have to buy it. It doesn't have to go into your deck. But if you happen to want Mickey Mouse in a vampire costume for your deck and you want to play a set of them, well, then you open some of these special packs.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, we both know that we all want it. We all know that
we
we
want
really
that.
gotta pay
Look,
for
it's
this.
not going to save
So
our
there's
wallets, all
Christmas
right?
as
Please
well?
don't do it. Yeah, no. One thing I think you did rightfully talk about is that there have been points where the meta has felt a little stale. And I think you're right. And I think that's why 4 sets has seemed right at the beginning. I do think, though, as more cards get added to the card pool, I am noticing that each set, the meta feels still like a little, like it doesn't get as stale as quickly as it did previously. So, like, when the first chapter released, I was like ready for the Floodborn. Floodborn came out, and I was like ready for Into the Inklings. Into the Inklings, was out, and I was like, once Ursula's Return came out, I was like, yeah, I'm ready for Ursula's Return. And with Shimmering Skies, I was like, I could probably use a little bit more time with Ursula's Return, because I'm like still never felt like I found the quite right deck to play in that set. So I wonder with like Shimmering Skies, it's like I'm still, like we're 2.5 weeks in, and I'm like, okay, I am not ready for set 6.
Well, I think, like you said before, is that they the decks aren't brand new for each set. They sort of build on each other. So I could definitely see in the future Ravensburger and Disney sort of slowing down, sort of this like boom, 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 4 sets a year, and then maybe 3, and then maybe they settle on 2 or something like that. Because you're right, each new set is a lot more to process, but ultimately it just, it adds a slight bit more to refining this sort of ultimate meta that is Disney Lorcana. It's not each new, like you said, with set 1, 2, 3, 4, you were turning a lot of things around. It was very, very, a lot of changes were happening in the meta. And I think as they go on, I could see maybe slowing down a little bit as the game sort of refines. But at the same time, I want more Stitch cards. I want more, I want more lines from the song Be Prepared, right? Like,
You want the whole song. I will just say you're right, with the exception of if you were running the correct deck all this time, which was Ruby Amethyst.
Oh my god.
It just never changed. It's always the same.
All right, Ray, what's our next question?
Our last question for the Constituents Corner this week is the most important one, because it is the actual citizens of Lorcana checking in on the mayor's sustenance and wanted to know what I had for lunch today. So this was Dan Regal from Twitter, and he actually asked yesterday.
His name's James, by the way.
It's
he
James,
goes by Dan Regal. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware that that I am eating well. I've been eating at the cafeteria at my new job, and yesterday I had a what did I have yesterday? Oh my god. I didn't write it down because I thought I'd remember. Today I had a delicious chicken sandwich that was absolutely fantastic with these Cajun chips, coleslaw, all this stuff. Loved it. And then yesterday I don't remember what I had. So that's
Wow.
how fried my brain is, because it's a brand new
Well,
job. It's my third day on the job, and
that's a subscriber we didn't get
Yeah.
for sure.
oh sorry, James.
Failed by the mayor. One election promise not kept.
I had a hoagie. I had an Italian sub on a hoagie yesterday. That's what
I'm
it
glad
was.
you
And
called it a
was
hoagie.
yeah. Well, that's how they labeled it. It's just a sandwich.
It's a hoagie, not a sub.
Yeah. But yeah, I thought that was funny when he asked that on one of the socials. So I was like, I'm absolutely going to answer that. Put that in the docket. What about you guys? What you guys been eating good?
Leftovers.
Yeah. My answer is lunch. What's that? I like perennially skip lunch because I'm busy with work. I just
Oh my goodness.
forget to eat lunch.
I have to take my lunch.
I generally like make eggs in the morning for breakfast, and I have to have coffee. It's like the first thing. If I do not have coffee, I will die.
Sheesh.
And then I usually make eggs, but then I a lot of times just forget about lunch because I get busy with work. The problem is like, so I work remotely, and so my company is all over the country and all different time zones. So there's always something that comes up, and so it gets harder to get away kind of midday for me to go do something. And even though like I work from home, I should just buy more food. My refrigerator definitely
you live
looks like I'm
next to a Target,
a bachelor.
literally.
I do, and I go there all the time. So. All right. Well, thank you so much for reading the mail with Constituents Corner with the mayor. And we're going to move on to, yes.
I was going to say, we do have a number of questions that didn't get asked, but we will be answering them in future episodes. So
we will, yes.
Yeah, don't feel left out.
And we're going to move on to Villain of the Week. So we have a set 3 card into the Inklands. This is a very controversial Villain of the Week into discussion we had, but it's a Lyle Tiberius Rourke, Cunning Mercenary, Storyborn Villain. It's an Emerald card, super rare, 3 cost, uninkable, 2 strength, 4 willpower, and quests for 1 lore. It has 2 abilities. The first is, well, now you know. When you play this character, chosen opposing character gains Reckless during their next turn. The next ability is, thanks for volunteering. Whenever one of your characters is banished, each opponent loses 1 lore. And the art is by Mike Parker. So, why is this our Villain of the Week?
Well, I think if you watched any of the games really from day 2 of this past DLC, you will have likely seen Lyle in them. While Emerald Steel was kind of gutted with the loss of Bucky, I think Emerald Amber and Emerald Amethyst both saw a big sort of uptick in popularity. And this Lyle card is sort of it for me. It marks sort of the first time that we've seen a successful competitive usage of lore loss, right? Or lore deduction from your opponent. It is very commonly known that if you are at 18 lore and you play a goat on your turn to go to 19, the game is over. Your opponent has 1 turn to win the game, or you lose. They lose. They can't remove your goat because that will get them, that will get you to 20. But with cards, there are plenty of them that exist, right? Lady Tremaine, the Aladdin, but with cards like this Lyle, where when something is banished, they lose the lore. We're seeing some really, really spicy combos. One of the really popular ones is sort of the self banishment. You use cards like Chernobog's Followers and the Magic Broom that both throw themselves away either after you quest or when you play another character, respectively. Grab you another card. If you have a Lyle on board, you're now you can quest with them. Quest with the Chernobogs. You get a lore, throw it away, banish it, grab a card, and your opponent loses a lore. The value on that is insane. And that's not even talking about cards like the library or anything like that. And so it I think, and the you mentioned it, the reckless ability, I think is just sort of a, cherry on top.
Yeah.
It's that jock sort of ability. But yeah, that Lyle is sort of this first real good use of lore deduction, and I think we'll see it continue from the meta that existed in Toronto onto this current meta. Um,
Yeah.
with like amber amethyst or emerald amethyst, green purple.
Yeah. It's one of those cards. I remember when it was announced where there was a lot of discussion on our local Discord about it. But the uninkable part is what made it. And at the time being, with only 3 sets, it's like, I don't know how this card really sees play on turn 3 or when you do that. But it's wild to me that it takes another 2 sets before people are like, okay, let's throw this card in here and actually do some work with it. As you pointed out, the reckless on it is, if you don't have a way out of reckless, like to sing a song or something, like he's inviting you into losing lore, right? So he tags you with reckless, and then you have to challenge your next turn unless you can sing or exert some other way. So you're basically being invited, like, hey, you're going to banish, or you're going to lose lore next turn no matter what you do if you can't get out of this. And having that tied to his other ability just makes it a really interesting combo, and something that I would like to play around with if I can get back to green. But I was actually against this last Sunday at Grapes against Britt. She was playing a green purple with it, and he hit me with. I was able to sing out of it, but her board just went wide, and I'm like, I can't do anything. I never got past 3 lore. I actually went back down to 1 because in the board control, because she was going forward, and I was just trying to maintain board state and couldn't do it. And I was like, all right, let's just go to game 3, because that card is really mean to me right now.
Yeah. I also think what's interesting too is we are seeing this as somewhat of a be prepared counter. Because you can kind of go wide on your board, and when be prepared hits, it is every card that goes in the discard, Lyle sees that, and you can lose lore that way. And so it's actually really interesting. And I think one of the reasons we're seeing it now versus earlier in the set, kind of goes to what we were just talking about with with more cards in the pool, there are more combinations that make this card stronger, right? To make its value in a deck, right? Because when you're sitting down and constructing a deck, you're looking at all your value. And like in set 3, it's like, yeah, this is an interesting card, but it just never found there were better value cards in Emerald decks, whether it be Emerald Steel or Emerald Amethyst. You were always finding better ways to fill that 3-drop slot. And I think now there's kind of some creativity. And honestly, in some ways, I think Bucky gave us that, that errata of Bucky gave us that creativity. And also, I just think some of the new cards that we've gotten in Shimmering Skies, like you mentioned, the library, these cards that kind of give more utility, to how we do things. Because, yeah, you can combo, a lot of the cards you want your opponent to take out with the library. The library is actually a high strength location. So if you run into the character that's at the location, you get this card draw plus losing lore. There's a lot that goes into that, these combos. And I think some of them are also like a lot more realistic. When we talk about combos in like set 3, even set 4, especially set 2, like we're getting into the realm of, say, like Fantasyland. We're into these. It's like, are you really going to get this 4-card combo off? Like, how consistent is that? And I think what we've seen is, as there are more cards in the card pool, there's the likelihood of getting certain card combos off becomes significantly more likely. Like the likelihood of having a Chernobog's Followers and a Lyle on the board pretty high. You could pair it with things like Broom, that allows you to like discard, banish a card to draw a card when you play it. So there's these combos that are now all synergizing around that allow you more utility to play, and you can be creative. You can pair it with a bunch of different things to get value on it that maybe just weren't strong, a set ago that are now strong. And I ultimately think like we're going to see a lot more of this card going forward in this meta. Is it necessarily going to be like this OP card? I don't know, but I definitely think it's a card you're going to see in especially Amethyst Emerald decks. I think it's going to be one of those kind of critical cards, for what I would say a staple card for those decks.
I think it's going to be more annoying than anything. Like it can be dealt with, right? The strength, he's Medusable, he's brawlable, but like he comes out at the opportune time, you're going to lose a little bit of lore, right? And yeah, I don't know. I want to see more of it before I really gauge how effective he is. But I've been witness to it this past weekend. I can see the potential of him, as you said, rising up this set.
Yeah, I think a big distinction, what Vince said about combos and trying to hit a combo. I think what you want to look more for are synergies, which is what Lyle ends up having with a lot of the really good purple cards right now. So, when you try and build a deck around a combo, you are forced into needing those pieces. Whereas when you have cards that generally have that are synergistic with a lot of the other cards that you have in your deck, they get more value out of them. There's more probability of more value from those cards. Chernobog's Followers and Broom are good on their own, period. They exist and are great cards. When you add something like, Lyle in there, and you're going to do those things anyway with Chernobogs and the Brooms. You're going to quest with them and throw them away to get that card draw because that's one of the main values that they have. Now you're getting even more synergy out of them with this Lyle. And so, you have a Chernobogs or a Broom, and you play a Lyle on board, you throw them away. Now you've given for 3 ink, you've given Reckless. They've lost 2 lore. You've drawn 2 cards. You've gained 2 lore from your questing on those characters, and so you end up getting a lot. They become very, very, very efficient, and I think very similar to a card like Flynn Rider, the Floodborn Flynn Rider, that when Bucky decks first started out, that card wasn't in most of the lists. And people eventually realized that, you know what? This is a Floodborn, great synergy with Bucky. This is evasive, hard to get rid of. This synergizes with your opponent having 0 cards in hand. Like, this is a great card that just sort of fits in and synergizes with a lot of other cards in the deck. And so I think Lyle absolutely in purple, with Amethyst, like you said, is a great pairing that I think we will see a lot more of. I personally, in this set, think that Amethyst, as much as we give to Sapphire, and we say that Sapphire is such a great color, got so many great tools this set, the more and more internal testing I've done, granted, we're barely in set 5 legality range, right? Has it even been 2 weeks past the launch? I understand. But in my internal testing, I think Amethyst is proving to be the powerhouse of the color. And it's just a matter of if something like Ruby or Emerald is going to pair with it the best. And I think... Or Sapphire. Okay, Mr. Blurple over here. But yeah, I think I think Lyle is a very strong arguing point for Emerald to say, hey, invite me to this Amethyst party that you've got here.
Yeah. So I want to think one of the questions I have for both of you though is, a lot of the cards we've mentioned here, except for, say, the library. But when we talk about Broom or Chernobog's Followers, these have actually been in Lorcana. So why do you think we're seeing Lyle more now? Like, what cards are you seeing that it synergize with him that's allowing him to, like, rise back up into the meta?
I think part of it is that we saw we saw the brooms sort of drop off. There was that 4-1 drop meta with just Chernobogs. I think brooms inherently are worse than Chernobog's followers because you need that other card to commit to the board. With the heavy discard meta that Bucky created and that existed because of Bucky, it was much harder to play some of these earlier curve value cards, these replacement cards. And so I think it's the meta that exists around these sort of combinations. Ruby Amethyst, Emerald Amethyst have both been very good. Same with Ruby Sapphire. Any of these really good combinations, Steel Song that you see exist. It's a matter of how is the meta shaping around it? What new cards do we need? Diablo, heavily favored Ruby decks, Brawl, specifically being added was huge, and Medusa existing was huge. And so I think now is a good time where these decks have an opportunity to see consistency. The other decks didn't get as much as I think they did. I think that's what it is.
I don't know that I have a good answer. I'm looking at the green purple deck where Lyle was featured in, at least one of them in the list that we have, and I don't know what was added that would made him more valuable than before. Because the examples that Andy used were perfect. Like, you banish the followers, they lose lore. You banish the broom, they lose lore. This one didn't even run Magic Broom, but. Yeah, I don't know that I have a good answer for you, Vince. Like, because he's been here since set 3. There are there's the new legendary Ana does. I don't know if he synergizes with that well. I'm just off the cuff right now. I'm just gonna let you guys handle that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Andy. I kind of said it in my answer that I think Bucky's errata has allowed kind of a new meta to develop around. Like, you wouldn't run this in a very discard heavy meta, I don't think. I also think as a result of, and I think it's partially because of Bucky's errata, but not entirely, is that the 3-drop slot isn't necessarily as competitive. You can start thinking about, like, do I run for Ursula's Deceiver's Vault? Do I run some of these other, like, key 3-drop cards? And maybe I don't need, 4 of them. Maybe I only need 3 of them. And if you run 3 of some of these keys, you can slot in. So I think really it's combination of those things that are happening, which is that Bucky's errata has pushed Bucky out of the meta, so there's not as much discard, and just allowing folks to be a little bit more creative in what was otherwise a really kind of key, like, crucial competitive 3-drop slot. Yeah. And that's my biggest takeaway.
And honestly, I think it maybe it is the library, right? Like, for Brad's instance, talking about that deck, Lyle's also very great in board focused metas, right? So if this person was expecting to see a lot of board focused removal where there's a lot of trading back and forth, then something like Lyle becomes really good. But maybe it is just something like the contribution of the library, right? I originally was shocked to find a card like the Queen's Castle either removed entirely from the deck or just lowered to 1 or 2 to make room for more of the library cards. And it could be as simple as just 1 additional card to these lists that now enable, because the library enables, rabbits and anything that banishes, it gets something on banishment. Cusco's is another one. And again, Lyle is very, very beneficial on things that get banished. So, Lyle, you're like, oh, I've got like 10% of stuff that just gets banished here. Lyle will be nice, but now I can add, these other 2 cards in here that are both beneficial together. And I think it could be a combination of all that sort of stuff that brings it out in the meta currently.
Yeah, there's also one other card I wasn't 100% thinking about too, which, I'm not convinced is a great card. but as another kind of synergistic card with Lyle is the Emerald Chromacon. Which is whenever one of your characters gets banished, you may banish
Return.
return.
Return. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Return a chosen. So there's some synergy there by giving an opponent reckless. You also, kind of get the ability to reduce lore and also
Control
have
the
some
board.
removal control. So I think there's some synergy there as well. But yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it develops. But this does seem like, just kind of looking at the decks, the limited selection of decks we had from the set 5 constructed at the DLC in Toronto, that we are seeing Lyle as a staple card in the Emerald Amethyst decks. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops. Anything else we want to say about this week's Villain?
No,
No.
I think- I'm
I'm
interested
excited.
to try it. Yeah, but
Yeah, I'm excited to see how it evolves. I think we're ahead of the curve here on this particular villain. I think people will look back and be like, "Wow, that's so awesome! That's such a great add to my deck." Probably they'll look back and be like, "You guys were idiots! You didn't know what you were talking about." But that's fine.
Well, that's great because you know what,
Surrounded by
you can let us know your opinion. Is Lyle the villain of the week, or is there another card that you think is this true week's villain? And with that, if you've enjoyed this episode, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. We're also on YouTube, so please be sure to like and subscribe and hit that bell icon to be notified of our next episode. Until next week, stay safe, fellow villains. Be wary of wannabe heroes who want to disrupt your villainous plans. And as always, remember the rules of villainy.